Story number 1. Morning Commute. I noticed him for the third time on Thursday morning. Same grey hoodie. Same position on the Green Line platform, about 15 feet from the rear doors where I always board. I told myself it meant nothing. Boston is a city of routines. Everyone takes the same train at the same time. Everyone has their spot on the platform, their preferred door, their usual car. I have mine. He probably has his. The rain was coming down hard that morning, that March rain that feels like it's been falling since January and might never stop. My umbrella was cheap and already inverting in the wind. I was thinking about my lesson plan for fractions, about whether I'd printed enough worksheets, about the parent-teacher conferences scheduled for next week. Normal things, Thursday morning things. He got on the same car as me, stood near the opposite doors, facing my direction but looking down at his phone. 30s, maybe 40s. The hoodie was oversized, dark grey, stained around the cuffs. I couldn't see his face clearly under the hood. At Copley, we both got off. I told myself that was normal too. Copley is a major stop, half the car emptied out. But when I climbed the stairs to street level and started my 4-block walk to the school, I could hear footsteps behind me, keeping the exact same pace. Not faster, not slower. When I stopped at the crosswalk on Dartmouth, the footsteps stopped. When the light changed and I walked, they resumed. I'm a punctual person. I've taught second grade at Hancock Elementary for 6 years, and I arrive at 7:45 every morning without fail. The kids start filtering in at 8:15. I like having that half hour to prepare, to arrange the classroom, to feel ready. Structure is important. Routine is important. Friday morning, the smell hit me before I saw him. Wet wool. That specific sour smell of a wool garment that's been rained on and never fully dried, just worn again and again. He was standing closer to me on the platform this time. Close enough that when the train pulled in and we both moved toward the doors, I could see the coffee stains on his right sleeve, a whole constellation of brown spots near the cuff. I boarded and moved toward the center of the car, putting distance between us. He stayed near the doors. I watched him in the reflection of the dark window, the tunnel light strobing past. He wasn't looking at his phone anymore. He was just standing there, hands in his pockets, hood up despite being inside. The wet wool smell intensified. He'd moved closer. I got off at Copley like always. So did he. I walked my 4 blocks. So did he. When I reached the school and used my keycard to enter through the staff entrance, I glanced back and saw him continue past on the sidewalk, hands still in his pockets, not looking at me or the building. Just a shared commute, I told myself. Just coincidence. Boston is full of people walking the same routes at the same times. I'm tired. I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. Monday morning, I changed my position on the platform, boarded 2 cars forward from my usual spot. The train pulled in. I got on, found a seat near the middle doors. He was already there. Same car. Standing near my exit door like he'd known exactly where I'd be. I felt something cold move through my chest. This wasn't coincidence. This was deliberate, but I still didn't know what it meant. Maybe he'd just happened to board the same car. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was creating a problem that didn't exist. During afternoon recess duty on Tuesday, Sarah, one of the teaching assistants, mentioned something while we were watching the second graders on the playground. "Have you noticed that guy across the street?" she asked, nodding toward the chain-link fence that separated the playground from the sidewalk. I looked. There were people walking past like always, a woman with a stroller, a man in a business suit talking on his phone. "Which guy?" I asked. "He's been there the past 2 days," Sarah said. "Always during second grade recess, just standing there by the fence. I thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but he never moves, just stands there for the whole 20 minutes. My hands went cold despite my gloves. "What does he look like?" I asked. "I don't know. He wears a grey hoodie. I can't really see his face." I scanned the sidewalk again and saw him. Same hoodie, same posture, hands in pockets. But he wasn't watching the playground. He was looking up at the building, at the second-floor windows, at my classroom window. I went straight to Principal Hendricks after recess. She listened, took notes, called campus police. An officer walked me to the station that evening, stayed with me on the platform, rode the train with me. The man in the grey hoodie wasn't there. Wednesday morning, he was back in his exact spot on the platform. Same position, same car, same wet wool smell. The officer had told me to document everything, to vary my route, to stay aware. But what was I documenting? A man who took the same train? Who walked on the same public sidewalk? Who stood on a public street outside a school? None of it was illegal. None of it was even provably connected. Just a feeling, just a pattern I couldn't stop seeing. Thursday morning during circle time, when the kids were sharing about their week, Emma raised her hand. "A nice man talked to me yesterday," she said brightly. "After school." My stomach dropped. "What man, Emma?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and teacher steady. "Outside, by the parking lot. He asked me which teacher drives the blue Honda." The room tilted slightly. I'd bought my Honda 6 weeks ago. It still had temporary plates. I parked it in the staff lot every morning in the same spot near the back fence. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I said I didn't know," Emma said. "My mum says not to talk to strangers." But he seemed nice. I called Principal Hendricks during lunch. She called the police again. They took a report. They said they'd increase patrols. They said to keep documenting, keep varying my routine, keep being aware. But awareness doesn't stop someone from standing on a public platform. Documentation doesn't prevent someone from riding public transit. Varying my routine doesn't erase the fact that he already knows my car, my school, my schedule, my exact classroom window. This morning I took an Uber to work. It cost $23 I don't really have in my budget. I parked my car 2 blocks away on a side street instead of the staff lot. During recess, I stood at the fence and looked across the street. The spot where he usually stands was empty. But that doesn't mean he's gone. It just means he's adapted too. I don't know what he wants. I don't know if he'll escalate or if this is all it will ever be. Just watching, just following, just existing in the same spaces I exist in until I can't tell the difference between reasonable caution and paranoia. The principal suggested I take a few personal days, let things cool down, but I can't stop teaching. I can't stop going to work. I can't restructure my entire life around a man in a grey hoodie who has never spoken to me, never touched me, never done anything I can point to and say definitively, this is a threat. All I have is wet wool and footsteps and a student who mentioned my car. All I have is the feeling that something is very wrong and the knowledge that feeling isn't enough. Story number 2, prescription refill. I pulled into the parking lot of the CVS on Thunderbird Road at 10:30 on a Thursday night. The lot was empty except for 2 employee cars near the loading dock and a silver sedan I didn't recognize parked under the one flickering light. I'd been putting off this refill for 3 days, letting the last pill sit in the bottle at home like a safety net I didn't want to admit I'd used up. The automatic doors opened into that specific smell every 24-hour pharmacy has. Antiseptic mixed with the stale recycled air from an overworked AC unit. The fluorescent lights made everything look bleached and flat. I was the only customer. A teenager stocking shelves in the back didn't look up. Maria was at the pharmacy counter, the same pharmacist who'd been filling my prescriptions for 2 years. She recognized me before I reached the counter. "Hey," she said, then paused. "Did your brother already pick it up?" I stopped walking. "I don't have a brother." She frowned at her computer screen. "Someone came in earlier, around 8, asked about your prescription." "Must be a mix-up," I said. "Wrong account or something." But she was shaking her head, scrolling through whatever notes were on her screen. "He knew your name, your full name. He was asking about the same medication." "My medication is for anxiety." Generic stuff, nothing you'd steal or resell. I felt that familiar tightness starting in my chest, the thing the pills are supposed to prevent. "What did he look like?" "I don't know. Normal? Baseball cap." He laughed when I told him it wasn't ready yet. She looked up at me. I figured he was family. He seemed like he knew what he was talking about. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Probably insurance fraud. Someone got my information somehow. She nodded, but she looked uneasy. You want me to process this now? It's ready. Can I see the security footage first? She hesitated, then called over the shift manager, a guy named Derek, who I'd seen before but never spoken to. I explained the situation. He led us to a small office behind the pharmacy, barely bigger than a closet, with a monitor showing a grid of camera angles. What time? Derek asked. Around 8, Maria said. He scrubbed through the footage. The timestamp in the corner rolled backward, the empty store occasionally interrupted by the Stalking kid walking past. Then at 8:07, a figure entered frame 3, the angle covering the pharmacy counter. Derek let it play at normal speed. The man wore a dark baseball cap pulled low and a jacket despite the Phoenix heat. He walked straight to the counter like he'd been there before, no hesitation, no looking around. Maria appeared in frame, and they spoke. I couldn't hear anything. Can you turn up the audio? I asked. Derek clicked something and the sound came on, thin and compressed but audible. I'm here to pick up a prescription, the man said. His voice was flat, almost bored. Name? Maria asked. He said my full name. First, middle, last. I felt cold despite the stuffy office. Date of birth? Maria asked. Standard procedure. He gave my birth date. Month, day, year. Correct. Maria's face on the screen showed confusion. And can you confirm your mother's maiden name? I watched the man on the screen. He didn't pause, didn't look up like he was trying to remember. He said my mother's maiden name. How the hell does he know that? I said. Derek and Mariah both looked at me. On screen, Mariah was telling the man the prescription wasn't ready yet. It wouldn't be processed until after 10. The man nodded. Then he asked, what time does he usually come in? I'm sorry, Mariah said. What time does he normally pick this up? Maria's posture changed on the footage, becoming more guarded. I can't give out that information. The man nodded again, unbothered, and walked out of frame. 8:09. 2 minutes total. Derek stopped the playback. You want me to call the police? Yeah, I said. My voice sounded distant, but I was still staring at the frozen image on the monitor. The man's back as he walked away. Something about his build, his gait, the way he moved through the space. Play that last part again, I said. Derek backed it up. The man asking what time I usually come in. I listened to his voice. What time does he usually come in? I knew that voice. Stop, I said. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my recent calls. Last week. Wednesday afternoon. Unknown number. I'd answered because I thought it might be my ex-wife's lawyer. A man's voice, professional, friendly. Said he was calling from the pharmacy system to verify my account information after a data security update. He'd asked me to confirm my birth date, my mother's maiden name, my current medications. I'd given him everything. I'd been at work, distracted, and it sounded legitimate. It was the same voice. He called me last week, I said, pretended to be customer service. Maria's eyes widened. Oh my God. Derek was already picking up the phone to call the police. I drove to the station 4 blocks away and filed a report. The officer taking my statement was polite, but I could tell he'd heard versions of this before. Identity theft, phishing, data breaches. He gave me a case number and told me to contact my insurance and credit bureaus, but he didn't understand. This wasn't about stealing my identity to open credit cards. The man came to the pharmacy. He knew what medication I take, what it's for. He knew what time I usually pick it up. He'd called me a week ago, and I'd just given him everything. He'd been patient, methodical. When I left the station, I called my insurance and requested a new member ID and a transfer to a different pharmacy. I changed every security question on every account I could think of. I sat in my car in the station parking lot, doing this for 40 minutes. The silver sedan from the CVS lot was gone when I drove back past it on my way home. I keep thinking about the footage, the way he walked straight to the counter. The way he asked what time I usually come in, like he was confirming something he already knew. I'd been 3 days late picking up my refill this month. I'm never 3 days late. My pattern is consistent. First Thursday after the prescription date, between 10 and 10:30 p.m., after my standing therapy appointment that runs until 9:45. He knew I'd be exactly 2 hours late tonight, which means he'd been watching long enough to know when I'd break pattern, long enough to predict it. I have my medication now. 30-day supply. The bottle sits on my kitchen counter and I stare at it and wonder if he knows that too, if he's keeping track. If he's still calling, still watching, still waiting for something I don't understand yet. The police said they'd review the footage and follow up. They haven't called. I don't go to that pharmacy anymore. I don't answer unknown numbers. But sometimes, late at night, I think about his voice on that security footage. How calm it was, how certain. What time does he usually come in? Like he had all the time in the world to find out. Story number 3. Canyon Loop. I pulled into the Canyon Loop trailhead at 4:30 in the afternoon, same as always. The light was already turning gold at the canyon rim, and I had maybe 90 minutes before it faded. I'd been shooting this trail every Thursday for the better part of a year. I knew the light, the angles, the exact spots where the juniper shadows would fall across the red rock. I was reaching for my camera bag when I saw it, my lens cap, the good one for my 70 to 200 millimeter, balanced on top of the wooden trail sign like someone had placed it there deliberately. I'd lost that cap here last week, looked for it for 20 minutes before giving up. And now here it was, impossible to miss, right at eye level. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. No dirt, no scratches. Someone must have found it on the trail and left it somewhere visible. That was the logical explanation. Hikers did that sometimes, common courtesy. But my stomach felt tight as I clipped it back onto my lens. The trailhead was empty. My Subaru was the only car in the lot. That wasn't unusual for a Thursday afternoon in late September. The summer crowds were gone and locals were mostly at work. I liked it this way, just me and the canyon. I shouldered my bag and started down the trail. The path was familiar enough that I barely had to watch my feet. Packed dirt, some loose gravel, patches of slick rock. I'd walked it dozens of times. The canyon opened up on my left, all layered sandstone and shadow. On my right, scrub oak and juniper climbed the slope. 20 minutes in, I noticed the boot prints. Fresh ones, pressed into a dusty section of trail. The tread pattern looked familiar. I stopped and crouched down, comparing them to my own boots. Same size, same tread. I stood up slowly, looking ahead down the empty trail. Someone else wore the same hiking boots as me. That wasn't strange. They were a popular brand, and plenty of people hiked this trail. But the prints were heading toward the overlook. My overlook. The spot I always stopped to shoot. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was public land. Anyone could hike anywhere. I kept walking. The canyon was quiet. Too quiet, I realized. Usually I'd hear canyon wrens by now, or the rustle of lizards in the brush. But there was nothing. Just my footsteps and my breathing. I glanced back over my shoulder. The boot prints were behind me now. I stopped walking, turned around completely. The prints were there in the dust, clear as anything, heading in the direction I'd just come from. But I hadn't passed anyone. I would have seen them. The trail didn't have many places to step off, and the scrub oak wasn't thick enough to hide in. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. I scanned the slope above the trail, the canyon below. Nothing moved. Maybe I'd missed them somehow. Maybe they'd been resting off trail and I'd walked past without noticing. People wore earbuds sometimes. I could have been in my own head thinking about compositions and light. I turned back toward the overlook and kept walking, but my hands felt cold. The overlook was another 10 minutes ahead. I could see the gap in the juniper where the trail opened up to the view. I always stopped there, always set up in the same spot where a flat shelf of rock jutted out over the canyon. When I reached it, I saw the cairn, A small stack of rocks, maybe a foot high, placed exactly where I always set up my tripod. The rocks were fresh, no lichen, no weathering. Someone had built this recently. I stood there staring at it, my camera bag heavy on my shoulder. Cairns weren't unusual on trails. People built them as markers, as art, as boredom projects. But this one was in my spot, the exact spot. I crouched down and looked at it more closely. 5 rocks, stacked carefully, balanced. My hands were shaking. I stood up and backed away from the edge. The silence pressed against my ears. No wind, no birds, nothing. I needed to leave. I turned and started walking back the way I'd come, faster now, not bothering to watch for good light or compositions. I just wanted to get back to my car. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not on the trail. Somewhere below me in the scrub oak on the slope, matching my pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again, faster. The footsteps resumed. I broke into a run. My camera bag slammed against my back with every step. I didn't care. The trail blurred under my feet, gravel skittering away from my boots. I focused on not tripping, not falling, just getting back to the trailhead. The footsteps stayed with me, somewhere off to my left, hidden in the brush. When I finally burst out into the parking lot, my lungs were burning. I fumbled my keys out of my pocket, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. I threw my camera bag into the passenger seat and locked the doors as soon as I was inside. I sat there for a moment, trying to catch my breath, watching the trailhead. No one came out. I started the engine and drove. The ranger station was 5 miles back toward town, a small building off the main road. I pulled in and sat in the parking lot for a minute, trying to calm down enough to sound rational. Ranger Valdez was at the desk when I walked in. I knew him slightly. He'd been working this area for years. I told him about the lens cap, about the boot prints, about the cairn. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear how I sounded. Paranoid. Scared. He listened without interrupting, then nodded. "Let's go take a look at your car," he said. "File a report, check the area." We walked back out to the parking lot. He did a slow circuit around my Subaru, checking the doors, the windows. Then he crouched down near the rear bumper. "What's this?" He reached under and pulled something free. An SD card, the small kind, taped to the underside of the bumper with black electrical tape. My stomach dropped. Valdez looked at me, then walked back into the station. I followed. He pulled out a laptop and slid the card into a reader. The folder opened. 47 photos, all of me, hiking Canyon Loop. Different days, different light. Some from 2 months ago when I was still wearing my blue jacket. Some from last week, all taken from behind. Some close enough that I could see the stitching on my backpack. I couldn't breathe. Valdez was already on his phone, calling someone. I heard him say surveillance and escalate and possible stalking, but his voice sounded far away. I stared at the screen. At myself, walking the trail I thought I knew, walking alone. Except I wasn't alone. I hadn't been alone in months.